In a world where the sea swallows the weak and the strong take what they desire, a young widow finds herself the captive of the most feared pirate in the Atlantic. But Captain Rowan Blackwell is not the monster the legends describe, and Isabel Harper is not the damsel he expects. Bound by danger and a forbidden attraction, they must navigate a storm of betrayal, war, and a love that could either save them or destroy them both. Will the pirate claim his prize, or will the widow steal his heart? Read the full story to discover if love can survive the tide. The air in the cargo hold of the Gilded Gull was thick enough to choke a man, smelling of wet wool, unwashed bodies, and the underlying rot of bilge water. Isabel Harper sat on a crate in the darkest corner, her arms wrapped tight around a bundle of blankets that shivered intermittently. "Mama?" The voice was thin, like paper tearing. "Shh, Jacob," Isabel whispered, pressing her lips to the boy's sweaty forehead. "Rest now. We'll be in the colonies soon. The air is warm there. It will clear your lungs." Jacob coughed, a wet, rattling sound that made Isabel's heart clench in her chest. She adjusted the shawl over him, her fingers trembling. They had spent the last of her late husband's coin to secure passage on this merchant ship, fleeing the debtors in Blackwater who had threatened to take more than just furniture. They had threatened to take her. Above them, the ship's bell began to clang, a frantic, dissonant rhythm that signaled no ordinary drill. Isabel froze. The heavy thud of boots on the deck above sounded like thunder. Then came the first explosion. The ship lurched violently to port, throwing Isabel from the crate. She scrambled on her hands and knees, shielding Jacob with her body, as barrels rolled and timber groaned under the stress of impact. "Pirates!" someone screamed from the hatchway. "God save us, it's the Tempest's kiss!" The blood drained from Isabel's face. Every widow and sailor in the port knew that name. Captain Rowan Blackwell. A man they said had a heart made of iron and a soul sold to the devil for fair winds. "Stay down," she hissed to Jacob, pushing him behind a stack of crates. "Do not make a sound, my love, no matter what you hear." The hatch burst open. Sunlight flooded the gloom, followed instantly by the silhouettes of men with drawn cutlasses. The screams of the merchant crew were cut short by the clash of steel. Isabel pressed herself into the shadows, praying to a god she hadn't spoken to in years. A heavy boot kicked aside the crate shielding her. Isabel looked up, gasping, into the face of a man with rotting teeth and a red bandana. He grinned, the expression devoid of any humanity. "Well now," the pirate sneered, reaching down to grab a handful of her hair. "Look at this little stowaway. The captain likes the pretty ones." "Don't touch me!" Isabel shrieked, clawing at his face. She fought with the ferocity of a cornered animal, her nails raking his cheek. The pirate roared in anger and raised his cutlass, the heavy blade gleaming in the shaft of light. Isabel squeezed her eyes shut, throwing her body over Jacob. The blow never fell. There was a sharp crack of a pistol, and the pirate's weight vanished. Silence descended on the hold, heavy and suffocating. Isabel slowly opened her eyes. The pirate lay dead a few feet away. Standing at the bottom of the stairs, wreathed in the smoke of his flintlock, was a man who seemed to absorb the light around him. He was tall, wearing a long black coat weathered by salt and time. His dark hair was tied back, revealing a face of sharp angles and a jaw set like granite. But it was his eyes, storm gray and terrifyingly calm, that pinned Isabel to the floor. "Captain Rowan Blackwell." "I gave orders," Rowan said, his voice a low rumble that vibrated through the timber, "that the women were to be rounded up, not butchered." He holstered his pistol and stepped over the dead man, looming over Isabel. She scrambled back, pressing Jacob against the hull. "Please," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Please, he's sick, don't hurt him." Rowan's gaze shifted from her terrified face to the bundle in her arms. He crouched down, bringing himself to her eye level. Up close, he smelled of gunpowder, leather, and rain. A child, Rowan muttered, a flicker of something unreadable passing through his eyes. He looked at the dead pirate, then back to her. You fought him. I would kill him again, Isabel said, her chin trembling, but her eyes fierce. Rowan stared at her for a long second, then stood up, extending a gloved hand. Get up. This ship is taking water. It will be at the bottom of the sea within the hour. Isabel hesitated. Where are you taking us? To the only wood that will float, Rowan replied coldly. My ship. The crossing between the two vessels was a nightmare of swaying planks and roaring waves. The ocean churned below, hungry for any misstep. Isabel clutched Jacob so tightly her knuckles turned white, her legs shaking as she navigated the narrow board connecting the sinking merchant ship to the pirate galleon. When she stumbled, a strong hand gripped her elbow, steadying her with bruising force. Eyes forward, widow, Rowan commanded from behind her. Look down and you fall. They reached the deck of the Tempest's Kiss. It was a world of organized chaos. Men ran to and fro, securing lines and hauling crates of looted cargo. But as Rowan stepped onto the deck with Isabel, the activity slowed. Eyes turned toward them. Hungry, curious, dangerous eyes. Isabel shrank inward, pulling the shawl over her head. Finn, Rowan barked. A broad-shouldered man with a thick red beard and a scar running through his eyebrow marched forward. Aye, Captain, take the woman to my quarters, Rowan ordered. A ripple of murmurs went through the crew. Finn raised an eyebrow. Your quarters, Captain? Usually the prisoners go to the brig. Rowan turned, his gaze sweeping over his crew, silencing them instantly. The boy is ill. The brig is damp. If the boy dies, the woman is useless to me. She is fragile. Isabel bristled at the word, but she bit her tongue. And, Rowan added, his voice dropping an octave, loud enough for the crew to hear, she is mine. Any man who touches her answers to my blade. Are we clear? Aye, Captain, the crew chorused, though the leers didn't entirely vanish. Go, Rowan said to Isabel, not looking at her. Finn gestured toward the aft of the ship. This way, lass, and keep your head down. Isabel followed the first mate, her heart hammering against her ribs. She had traded a sinking ship for a pirate's den. As she passed Rowan, she glanced at him, but he was already shouting orders to set sail, his back turned to her like a wall of stone. The captain's cabin was a shock to the senses. After the filth of the merchant hold and the violence of the deck, this room was a sanctuary of dark mahogany, velvet curtains, and walls lined with books. A large map was spread across a desk, pinned down by a dagger. Finn ushered her inside and pointed to a velvet settee. Stay here. Don't touch the maps. Don't touch the weapons. In fact, don't touch anything. Is he going to kill us? Isabel asked, her voice small. Finn paused at the door, his expression softening just a fraction. Rowan isn't a butcher, lass, but he isn't a saint either. Keep the boy quiet, and you might survive the week. The door clicked shut, and the lock turned with a heavy thud. Isabel exhaled, a sound that was half sob. She laid Jacob down on the settee, unwrapping the blankets. His face was flushed, his breathing shallow. Mama, I'm thirsty, he rasped. I know, baby, I know. Isabel looked around frantically. On a side table, she found a crystal decanter of water and a glass. She poured a small amount, supporting Jacob's head as he drank greedily. She spent the next hour pacing the room, checking the windows. They were stern windows, looking out over the wake of the ship. The merchant vessel was gone, swallowed by the deep. There was no escape. They were in the middle of the ocean, captives of the most feared man in the Atlantic. The door handle turned. Isabel spun around, positioning herself between the door and Jacob. Captain Rowan Blackwell entered. He had removed his heavy coat, revealing a white linen shirt stained with soot and sweat, the sleeves rolled up to his elbows. He looked exhausted. He stopped when he saw her defensive stance. You look like a cat ready to scratch. I am a mother, Isabel said, lifting her chin. It is the same thing. Rowan closed the door and leaned against it, crossing his arms. He studied her, her torn dress, her disheveled hair, the fire in her eyes. "What is your name?" "Isabel. Isabel Harper." "And the boy?" "Jacob." Rowan nodded once. He walked past her to the desk, pouring himself a drink of amber liquid. He didn't offer her any. "You are wondering why you are here, Isabel." "I assume for ransom," she said. "Though you will be disappointed. I have no money, no family to pay you." Rowan took a sip, watching her over the rim of the glass. "I don't want your money. We took enough gold from the Gilded Gull to feed this crew for a year." "Then let us go. Put us ashore at the next port." "I cannot do that." "Why?" she demanded, stepping forward. "Because," Rowan said, setting the glass down with a sharp clink. "There is a wolf hunting us. Captain Simon Frost. He saw my sails. If I stop at a port now, he catches us. And if Frost catches us, he won't put you in a cabin with velvet cushions. He will put you to use." Isabel shivered at the implication. "So I am a prisoner for my own safety?" "You are a prisoner because I say you are," Rowan corrected, his voice hardening. "You are on my ship. You eat my food. You breathe my air. Until I say otherwise, your safety, your life, and your body are under my command." Isabel felt a cold dread coil in her stomach. "My body?" Rowan's eyes darkened. He stepped closer, invading her space until she had to crane her neck to look at him. He radiated heat and danger. "Do not misunderstand me, widow. I have no interest in forcing a terrified woman into my bed. But the crew needs to believe you are mine. If they think you are available, I cannot stop them all. So, you will sleep here. You will stay close to me. You will let them believe what they want." "A lie," Isabel whispered. "A shield," Rowan corrected. The peace, however fragile, did not last. 2 days later, the morning broke with the roar of cannons. Isabel woke with a start, nearly falling off the settee where she had curled up next to Jacob. The ship was listing heavily to the right. "Stay down!" she cried to Jacob, who was crying in confusion. The door flew open and Rowan stormed in. He was fully armed, a sword at his hip and 2 pistols in his belt. "Frost found us," he said, his voice tight. "He has a faster ship. We have to turn and fight." "What do we do?" Isabel asked, clutching Jacob. "You stay away from the windows," Rowan ordered. He grabbed a heavy woolen blanket from his bunk and threw it at her. "Cover the boy. The glass might shatter." He turned to leave, but paused, looking back at them. For a moment, the mask of the pirate captain slipped, revealing a man burdened by the weight of too many lives. "If they board us, lock this door. If they break it down." He pulled a small dagger from his boot and tossed it onto the rug at her feet. "Don't hesitate." Then he was gone. For the next hour, the world was noise. The deafening boom of black powder, the screaming of men, the splintering of wood. A cannonball struck the hull somewhere near the stern, and the cabin shook so hard a bookshelf collapsed, spilling leather-bound volumes across the floor. Isabel huddled in the corner, the dagger clutched in her hand, singing a lullaby to Jacob, but she couldn't even hear herself. Then the rhythm changed. The cannon stopped. The shouting turned to cheers. Isabel waited, her heart pounding in her throat. Minutes turned to an hour. Finally, the lock clicked. Isabel raised the dagger, her hand shaking. Rowan entered. He was bleeding from a cut above his eye, blood trailing down his cheek into his collar. He looked at the dagger in her hand, then up to her eyes. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "You can put that down, Isabel. We outran him, for now." She lowered the knife, her strength leaving her in a rush. She slumped against the wall. "Is it over?" "The chase is over," Rowan said, wiping the blood from his brow with his sleeve. "But the sea is long." He walked over to the desk, wincing as he moved. Isabel noticed he was favoring his left side. "You're hurt," she said, surprising herself. "It's nothing. It's bleeding through your shirt." Rowan looked down at his ribs. "A splinter," It happens. Sit, she commanded. Rowan looked at her, eyebrows raised. I beg your pardon? I said sit. If you die of infection, who protects us then? The man with the red beard? Rowan let out a huff that might have been a laugh. He sat heavily in the chair. Finn would probably trade you for a barrel of rum. Isabel found a basin of water and a clean cloth. She approached him cautiously. This will sting. I've had worse, he grunted. As she cleaned the wound on his side, she was acutely aware of the hardness of his muscles beneath her fingers, the heat of his skin. He watched her, his gaze intense, tracking the movement of her hands. You have gentle hands, he murmured, almost to himself. I nursed my husband for 2 years before he died, Isabel said quietly. I know my way around a wound. Rowan caught her wrist. His grip was firm, but not painful. Your husband was a fool to leave you alone in this world. He didn't have a choice. Consumption takes who it wants. We all have choices, Rowan said darkly, releasing her hand. And consequences. That night, the fever took hold of Jacob with terrifying speed. Isabel woke to the sound of him gasping. His skin was burning hot, dry like parchment. No, 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 she wept, sponging his face with the tepid water from the pitcher. Jacob, stay with me. He was delirious, muttering about the cold, his small body convulsing. Isabel ran to the bunk where Rowan was sleeping. She didn't care about propriety or fear. She shook him awake. Wake up! Help me! Rowan was awake instantly, a knife in his hand before his eyes even focused. He saw Isabel's tear-streaked face and lowered the weapon. What is it? It's Jacob. He's burning up. He can't breathe. Rowan rolled out of the bunk, fully dressed save for his boots. He crossed the room in 2 strides and placed a large hand on the boy's chest. He cursed softly. It's the dampness of the sea, Rowan said. His lungs are weak. Do you have a doctor on board? Isabel begged, grabbing Rowan's arm. Please. The ship's surgeon is a butcher who cuts off limbs. He would kill the boy. Rowan pulled away from her and went to a heavy iron chest at the foot of his bed. He unlocked it with a key from around his neck. He rummaged through gold coins and jewelry as if they were trash, finally pulling out a small, blue glass vial sealed with wax. What is that? Laudanum mixed with silver root. From the east, Rowan said. It's worth more than the ship. He didn't hesitate. He uncorked the vial and moved to the boy. Lift his head. Isabel obeyed, supporting Jacob. Rowan carefully tipped a few drops into the boy's mouth. Swallow, lad, Rowan commanded softly. That's it. They waited. The minutes stretched like hours. Slowly, Jacob's breathing eased. The convulsions stopped. He slipped into a deep, quiet sleep. Isabel slumped forward, burying her face in the mattress, sobbing with relief. She felt a hand on her shoulder. Heavy, warm, hesitant. He is strong, Rowan said quietly, like his mother. Isabel looked up at him. The candlelight flickered in his gray eyes, and for the first time she didn't see a captor. She saw a man who had just saved her world. Thank you, she whispered. Rowan withdrew his hand, his expression closing off again. Get some sleep, Isabel. Tomorrow, we sail into rougher waters. He walked back to the window, staring out at the dark, endless ocean, a solitary figure guarding the door. And for the first time since leaving port, Isabel closed her eyes and slept without fear. Days at sea bled into one another, marked not by hours, but by the ringing of the ship's bell and the changing shifts of the sun. For Isabel, the captain's cabin became a world unto itself, a gilded cage of mahogany and velvet. She busied herself to keep the madness of confinement at bay. She organized the scattered books, mended the tear in Jacob's trousers with a bone needle found in a drawer, and scrubbed the floorboards until her hands were raw. Jacob was healing. The color had returned to his cheeks, and his cough, though still present, no longer sounded like death rattling in his chest. But as his strength returned, so did his restlessness. "Can we go outside, Mama?" he asked, pressing his nose against the thick glass of the stern window. "Not yet," Isabel murmured, looking at the locked door. The lock clicked. It was the pattern of their lives now. Finn, the burly first mate, entered with a tray of food, hard biscuits, dried meat, and a surprisingly fresh orange. "Captain says you're to come on deck for air," Finn grunted, setting the tray down. "Boy too. But you stay by the helm, and you don't speak to the crew." Isabel felt a rush of gratitude mixed with apprehension. She wrapped her shawl tight and took Jacob's hand. "Thank you, Finn." "Don't thank me," Finn muttered as he led them out. "Thank the captain's strange moods. Usually, prisoners don't see the sun." As they emerged onto the main deck, the salty wind hit Isabel like a physical blow, glorious and sharp. The sky was a piercing blue, but the moment they stepped into the light, silence rippled across the ship. Men paused in their work, coiling ropes, scrubbing decks, to stare. It wasn't the leering hunger of the first day, but a heavy, assessing curiosity. Isabel kept her head high, marching toward the quarterdeck where Rowan stood by the wheel. He didn't look at her, his gaze fixed on the horizon, but his posture stiffened as she approached. "Keep the boy away from the railing," Rowan said, his voice carrying over the wind without him turning his head. "I am not a fool, Captain," Isabel replied, letting Jacob sit near the mizzenmast where he could watch the sea safely. She moved to the rail, gripping the wood. "How long until we reach land?" Rowan finally turned. The wind whipped strands of dark hair across his face. "We make port in 2 days, but you will not be disembarking. You cannot keep us here forever." Rowan stepped closer, blocking her view of the crew below. "I can keep you as long as the sea is dangerous, Isabel. Do not mistake my hospitality for freedom." Finn, who had lingered nearby, leaned in as Rowan turned back to the helmsman. "He's not doing this to be cruel, lass," the first mate whispered. "He's a man haunted. You and the boy, you're ghosts to him. Better you learn that now before you try to get close." Isabel frowned, watching Rowan's broad back. "I have no intention of getting close to a pirate." Finn gave a dry chuckle. "The sea has a way of making liars of us all." 3 nights later, the calm was broken by a scuffle on deck, shouts, a thud, and then silence. Isabel sat up in the dark, clutching the blanket. The door opened, and Rowan slipped in. He moved stiffly. He went straight to the basin, splashing water on his face. When he turned, the moonlight revealed a dark stain spreading on the white sleeve of his shirt. "You're bleeding," Isabel said, rising from the settee. "A disagreement over shares," Rowan dismissed, unbuttoning his cuff with difficulty. "The men get restless when we haven't raided in a fortnight." "Let me see." Isabel didn't wait for permission. She crossed the room and pushed his hand away. The gash on his forearm was deep, an ugly slice from a knife. "This needs stitches, Rowan. It's gaping. I'll wrap it." "And it will rot," she countered. "Sit down." To her surprise, he obeyed. He sat on the edge of the desk, the maps crinkling under his weight. Isabel fetched the sewing kit she had found and a bottle of rum. "Drink," she ordered. Rowan took a swig, his eyes never leaving her face. "You enjoy giving orders, Mrs. Harper." "Only when the men around me are behaving like children." She poured a little rum over the wound. Rowan hissed through his teeth, his free hand gripping the edge of the desk until the wood groaned. "Sorry," she whispered. She threaded the needle. "This will hurt. Do it." As she began to stitch, the cabin shrank. The only sounds were the creaking of the timbers and their breathing. Isabel focused entirely on the task, her fingers brushing against his warm, calloused skin. She could feel the tension in his muscles, the sheer power contained within him. Rowan watched her. He watched the way her brow furrowed in concentration, the way her eyelashes cast shadows on her cheeks. "You have hands too soft for this life," he murmured, the words slipping out before he could stop them. Isabel paused, the needle hovering. She looked up, and for a moment they were just a man and a woman in the dark. "My hands have buried a husband and nursed a dying child, Captain. They are stronger than they look." Rowan's gaze dropped to her lips, then back to the wound. "I don't doubt it. She tied off the knot and bit the thread. Done. Rowan flexed his arm, testing the stitches. Thank you. Don't get into any more knife fights, she said, stepping back to put distance between them. The air was suddenly too thin. I make no promises, Rowan said softly, but I will try. You see, the dynamic shifted after that night. The monster had become a man, and the man had a name. Jacob, feeling the change in atmosphere, grew bolder. One afternoon, while Isabel was napping, Jacob climbed onto the captain's chair. When Isabel woke, her heart stopped. Rowan was leaning over the desk, and Jacob was standing on the chair next to him. This is north, Rowan was saying, pointing to a star chart. The North Star never moves. It's the only thing in this world that doesn't lie to you. Does it tell you where to go? Jacob asked, his eyes wide. It tells you where you are, Rowan corrected. Knowing where you are is more important than knowing where you're going. Isabel stayed still, feigning sleep. She saw the way Rowan stood, careful not to touch the boy, yet leaning in protectively. There was a hunger in the pirate's expression, a deep, starving loneliness that he tried to mask with gruffness. Are you a bad man, Captain? Jacob asked suddenly. Isabel held her breath. Rowan straightened up. The softness vanished from his face. Yes, Jacob, I am. Mama says you saved me. Saving one life does not erase the ones I have taken, Rowan said heavily. Now, off the chair, your mother's waking up. He had known she was awake. Isabel sat up, her cheeks flushing. Rowan didn't acknowledge her. He simply rolled up the map and locked it away, the barrier between them slamming back into place. The weather turned the following evening. The sky bruised purple and black, and the sea began to heave with the fury of a brewing tempest. By nightfall, the tempest's kiss was living up to its name. The ship groaned and pitched violently. Secure the cabin, Rowan shouted, bursting through the door as a massive wave slammed into the hull. Isabel was already on the floor, holding Jacob under the heavy oak table. Books flew off the shelves, hitting the walls like missiles. Rowan struggled to latch the stern windows, wind and rain lashing into the room. The lantern, swinging from the ceiling, shattered against a beam, plunging the room into darkness. Rowan! Isabel screamed as the ship listed almost onto its side. She felt strong arms grab her in the dark, hauling her and Jacob up. Rowan pulled them to the bunk, which was bolted to the floor. Stay here! Hold the railing! He roared over the thunder. The ship corrected itself with a bone-jarring thud. Isabel was thrown forward, colliding with Rowan's chest. He wrapped his arms around her, pinning her against the wall to steady her. For a heartbeat, the storm didn't exist. There was only the heat of his body, the wet linen of his shirt against her cheek, and the rapid thud of his heart against her own. His face was inches from hers in the gloom. She could feel his breath, ragged and hot. I have you, he whispered into her hair. I have you. Then the ship pitched again, and he pulled away. Stay on the bunk. He vanished back out into the rain-lashed deck, leaving Isabel trembling, not from the cold, but from the electric shock of his touch. 2 days later, the storm had passed, leaving the sea eerily calm. They sailed into the Port of Shadows, a hidden cove surrounded by jagged cliffs, known only to those who lived outside the law. The ship docked, and the crew hurried to offload damaged cargo and restock supplies. Rowan stood before the mirror in the cabin, adjusting his coat. He looked every inch the terrifying pirate lord, pistols loaded, sword polished, expression grim. I want to go ashore, Isabel said, standing behind him. We need fresh linens. Jacob needs milk. Finn will get what you need, Rowan said, checking the prime on his pistol. You do not leave this room. I am not a piece of cargo, Rowan. He spun around. No, you are a prize. Do you know what this port is? It is a hive of scum, slavers, and spies. If Simon Frost has men here, and he likely does, one look at you, and they will know who you are. Who I am? She challenged. I am a nobody. You are the woman on my ship, Rowan growled. That makes you a target. You stay here." He locked the door from the outside with a definitive click. Isabel kicked the door in frustration. She felt the walls closing in. The safety he offered was starting to feel like a prison. Rowan walked the muddy streets of the port, his hat pulled low. The air smelled of roasted pig, stale beer, and desperation. He needed water, powder, and timber. He entered the Drowned Rat, tavern built into the hull of a wrecked ship. The noise died down as he walked to the bar. "Whiskey," he ordered. As he drank, he heard voices at a table behind him. "I saw the Tempest dock. They say Blackwell has a woman aboard, a widow. Maybe she's worth coin to Captain Frost," another voice sneered. "He's offering 500 gold for information on Blackwell's weaknesses." Rowan set his glass down. He didn't turn around. "Gentlemen," the table went silent. "I believe you were discussing my business," Rowan said, turning slowly. There were 4 of them. Rough men, mercenaries. One of them stood up, hand on his sword. "We were just talking, Captain." "Talk is dangerous," Rowan said. The man drew his sword. A mistake. Rowan moved with a speed that belied his size. He shattered his whiskey glass into the man's face, ducked a swinging cutlass, and drove his elbow into the second man's throat. It wasn't a duel. It was a demolition. Within seconds, 3 men were on the floor groaning, and the 4th was pinned against the wall by Rowan's forearm. "Tell Frost," Rowan hissed, his face inches from the terrified mercenary, "that if he wants me, he can come find me. But if he looks at the woman, I will carve his heart out and feed it to the sharks." He dropped the man and walked out, his knuckles split and bleeding, his rage barely contained. When Rowan returned to the cabin, the sun was setting. He looked like he had walked through hell. His coat was torn, his lip was split, and he smelled of violence. Isabel gasped when she saw him. "Rowan, what happened?" He didn't answer. He went to the desk and poured a drink, his hands shaking slightly. "Did you fight?" she asked, approaching him. "Why?" "Because they were talking about you," he snapped, slamming the glass down. "Frost has a bounty out. Not just on me, on my weaknesses." Isabel froze. "I am a weakness? You are a distraction," Rowan roared, turning on her. The anger in his eyes was terrifying, but beneath it, Isabel saw panic. "I cannot fight the world and watch my back for you at the same time. You make me vulnerable, Isabel." "Then let me go," she shouted back, shoving his chest. "If I am such a burden, leave me here." "I can't." "Why?" Rowan grabbed her shoulders, pulling her close. His grip was hard, desperate. "Because if I let you go, he will find you, and he will hurt you to break me. And I—" He stopped, his chest heaving. "I cannot watch another innocent die because of my sins." Isabel stared up at him, her anger melting into confusion and something softer. "Another?" Rowan released her abruptly and turned away, leaning his forehead against the cool glass of the window. The silence stretched, heavy and thick with unsaid words. "Rowan," she whispered, "who did you lose?" He didn't speak for a long time. The ship rocked gently in the harbor waters. When he finally spoke, his voice was a broken ruin of the command he usually held. "Her name was Ilara," he said to the glass. "And my son, his name was Thomas. He would have been Jacob's age." Isabel covered her mouth with her hand. Rowan turned to face her, his eyes shining with unshed tears. "I was in the Royal Navy, a captain, honorable. I hunted pirates, but I hunted the wrong one. A corrupt admiral wanted a cut of a pirate's hoard. I refused to take the bribe. So while I was at sea, they burned my home." He took a shaky breath. "I found them in the ashes. I turned my ship around, raised the black flag, and I haven't stepped foot on English soil since." He looked at Isabel, his expression pleading for her to understand the monster he had become. "I see Thomas in your boy's eyes, Isabel, and I see Ilara's fire in yours. So do not ask me to let you go, because I will burn the world down before I let Frost or anyone else take you from me." Isabel's heart broke and soared all at once. She crossed the room slowly. She didn't say a word. She simply reached out and took his bruised, bloodied hand in hers, pressing it to her cheek. Rowan closed his eyes, leaning into her touch, a man starving for a grace he didn't believe he deserved. In the quiet of the cabin, the line between captor and protector dissolved completely, leaving only two broken souls holding on to each other in the dark. The Tempest's kiss navigated the treacherous reefs with the grace of a dancer, slipping through a gap in the rock face so narrow that Isabel held her breath as the jagged stones scraped the hull. But as they cleared the passage, the world opened up. The forgotten cove lay before them like a jewel dropped by the gods. The water was a startling turquoise, so clear the white sand bottom was visible fathoms down. Lush jungle cascaded down the cliffs, alive with the calls of exotic birds. A waterfall tumbled into a freshwater pool near the beach, misting the air with rainbows. "It's beautiful," Isabel breathed, standing at the railing. Rowan stood beside her, the tension in his shoulders finally uncoiling. "It is the only place in the world where the Navy charts are blank. We are ghosts here, Isabel." The anchor dropped with a splash that echoed off the cliffs. For the first time in weeks, the ship was still. "Can we swim?" Jacob asked, bouncing on his heels, his eyes wide with wonder. Rowan looked down at the boy and actually smiled, a rare, genuine expression that transformed his harsh face. "Aye, lad, but stay in the shallows. The current past the reef is strong." They took the longboat to shore. As the keel grated against the sand, Isabel felt a profound sense of relief wash over her. She stepped out, the warm water lapping at her ankles, and closed her eyes, tilting her face to the sun. "Welcome home," Rowan said softly, handing her a basket of supplies. "Is this your home?" she asked. "It is the closest thing I have to one." The next 2 days were a dream. The fear of pursuit, the smell of gunpowder, the claustrophobia of the cabin, all of it faded in the golden light of the cove. Isabel sat on a piece of driftwood, watching Rowan and Jacob. Rowan had discarded his heavy coat and boots, his trousers rolled up to his knees. He stood waist-deep in the azure water, holding a makeshift spear, teaching Jacob how to spot fish in the refraction of the light. "Patience." Rowan's voice drifted over the water. "You must wait until they stop moving. Then, strike." Jacob lunged, splashing wildly. He missed, and Rowan laughed, a deep, rich sound that made Isabel's heart flutter. He ruffled the boy's hair, patient and kind. Isabel looked at Rowan's back. Without his shirt, the map of his life was visible. Scars crisscrossed his skin, burn marks, slice wounds, the puckered star of a bullet hole near his shoulder. He was a tapestry of violence, yet he handled her son as if he were made of glass. Later that afternoon, while Jacob built a sandcastle with Finn, who had surprisingly taken a shine to the boy, Rowan sat beside Isabel on the driftwood. He was drying off, water beating on his skin. "He looks better," Rowan said, nodding toward Jacob. "The sea air agrees with him," Isabel admitted. She traced a pattern in the sand with her toe. "Or perhaps it is the company." Rowan looked at her sideways. A pirate is poor company for a growing boy. "He doesn't see a pirate," Isabel said quietly. "He sees a hero." Rowan looked away, his jaw tightening. "He should not. Heroes die, Isabel. Or they live long enough to become villains." "And which are you?" Rowan turned back to her, his gray eyes intense. "I am the man who will keep you alive, whatever the cost." Isabel reached out, her fingers brushing the scar on his shoulder. He flinched slightly, but didn't pull away. "This one? A musket ball. Off the coast of Spain. And this?" She touched a long, jagged line on his ribs. "A cutlass. I was slow." "You don't seem slow to me," she whispered. Rowan caught her hand, holding it against his chest. His heart beat steadily beneath her palm. "I was a different man then. I had nothing to lose. Now." He squeezed her hand, his thumbs stroking her knuckles. "Now I am terrified." On the third night, the crew built a bonfire on the beach. They roasted a wild boar and drank rum, singing shanties that echoed against the cliffs. The atmosphere was festive, a release of the tension they had all been carrying. Isabel and Rowan walked away from the light, strolling down the shoreline where the bioluminescence in the water mirrored the stars above. "What happens next?" Isabel asked. The question hung in the air, heavy and inevitable. "We cannot stay here forever." "We could," Rowan said. He stopped walking and turned to her. "I have enough gold buried on this island to live for 3 lifetimes. We could let the ship rot. Let the world think we drowned." "You would give up the sea?" "I would give up the war," he corrected. "I'm tired of fighting, Isabel." He stepped closer, the moonlight silvering his features. The air between them crackled with electricity. "And what of us?" Isabel asked, her voice trembling. "Am I still your prisoner?" Rowan reached out, cupping her face with both hands. His thumbs traced her cheekbones. "You have never been a prisoner in your heart, Isabel. You are the fiercest creature I have ever met." "Rowan, I don't want to be your captor," he rasped, leaning down. "I want to be the man you choose." Isabel rose on her tiptoes. "I choose you," she breathed. Rowan groaned low in his throat and lowered his mouth to hers. "Captain!" The shout shattered the moment like glass. Rowan pulled back instantly, his hand going to the hilt of his sword. Finn was running down the beach, waving a lantern. "Captain, the lookout! A signal!" Rowan's face hardened into granite. "What signal?" "A mirror flash from the ridge. Someone signaled out to sea." Rowan looked up at the dark cliffs surrounding the cove. "We have a traitor." The peace of the cove evaporated instantly. Rowan grabbed Isabel's hand. "Get Jacob, get to the longboat, now!" "What is happening?" Isabel cried as he dragged her back toward the fire. "Someone told Frost where we are," Rowan snarled. "He's here." As if on cue, a thunderous boom echoed from the mouth of the cove. A massive ship, its sails blacker than the night, drifted into view, blocking the exit. The Tempest's Kiss was trapped. Cannons flared in the darkness, the sand around the bonfire exploded. Men screamed. The festive atmosphere turned into a slaughterhouse. "Jacob!" Isabel screamed, tearing her hand from Rowan's grip and running toward the fire where she had left her son. "Isabel, wait!" Rowan shouted, but he was cut off by a group of his own men engaging a landing party that was rowing ashore from Frost's ship. Isabel scrambled through the chaos. Smoke burned her eyes. "Jacob!" She found him huddled behind a log, crying, clutching his ears. Finn was standing over him, sword drawn, fighting off 2 men with red sashes. "Take him!" Finn roared at her, parrying a blow. "Go to the caves!" Isabel grabbed Jacob, hauling him into her arms. She turned to run toward the jungle, but a figure stepped out of the smoke. It wasn't a stranger. It was Silas, the ship's cook, a man who had given Jacob extra biscuits just yesterday. "Silas?" she gasped. Silas held a pistol leveled at her chest. "Sorry, lass. Frost pays in gold. Blackwell pays in promises." "You traitorous dog!" Rowan's voice roared from the darkness. Rowan launched himself from the shadows, tackling Silas. The pistol went off, the shot going wild. The 2 men rolled in the sand, fists flying. "Run, Isabel!" Rowan shouted, pinning Silas down and delivering a brutal blow to his jaw. But it was too late. From the surf behind her, a cold voice spoke. "I wouldn't run if I were you, my dear. You might trip." Isabel spun around. Standing in the shallow water, flanked by 10 heavily armed men, was a man in a pristine white coat with a cruel, handsome face. Captain Simon Frost. "Well, well," Frost drawled, stepping onto the sand. "The widow and the wolf. How domestic." Rowan stood up, leaving the unconscious Silas. He was breathing hard, his sword in his hand, but he was surrounded. He looked at Frost, then at the 10 muskets, aimed at Isabel and Jacob. "Let them go, Simon," Rowan said, his voice deadly calm. "This is between us." "Oh, but it isn't," Frost smiled, a shark-like expression. "You took something of mine once, Rowan. My pride. Now I'm going to take everything of yours." Frost snapped his fingers. Two of his men lunged forward, grabbing Isabel and Jacob. No! Rowan surged forward, but three men slammed into him, beating him down with the butts of their muskets. Rowan! Isabel screamed as she was dragged backward into the water. Rowan fought like a demon, throwing men off him, but a heavy blow to the back of his head sent him crashing to the sand. He looked up, blood pouring into his eyes, reaching out a hand toward her. Isabel, take them to my ship, Frost ordered, looking down at Rowan with disdain. And burn this one's vessel. Let him watch his kingdom turn to ash. Isabel kicked and screamed, clutching Jacob to her chest as they were hauled into the enemy longboat. The last thing she saw was Rowan, beaten and bloody on the sand, watching helplessly as the darkness swallowed them whole. The hold of the Pale Rider was a stark contrast to the warm, wood-paneled sanctuary of Rowan's cabin. Here, the air was cold and smelled of vinegar and iron. Isabel sat on the damp floor, Jacob's head in her lap. He was shivering, not from fever this time, but from pure terror. "Mama, where's Captain Rowan?" Jacob whispered, his voice barely audible over the creaking of the hull. "He is coming," Isabel lied, smoothing his hair. "He is coming for us." The door unlatched, and Captain Simon Frost entered. He held a silver candelabra, the light casting long, dancing shadows against the ribs of the ship. He was impeccably dressed, not a speck of sand or blood on his white coat. "Comfortable, Mrs. Harper?" Frost asked, his voice smooth as silk. "You are a monster," Isabel spat. Frost chuckled softly. "Monsters are just men who refuse to pretend they're good. Rowan, he pretends. He plays the protector, the father, but we both know what he is, a killer." "He is twice the man you are," Isabel said, standing up to face him. She hid her trembling hands in the folds of her dress. Frost's smile vanished. He stepped closer, the candlelight flickering in his cold blue eyes. "We shall see. By dawn, I will hang him from my yardarm. And you will watch." He turned and left, the heavy bolts sliding home. Isabel didn't collapse. She didn't cry. A cold, hard resolve settled in her chest, a piece of Rowan's spirit that had taken root in her. She looked around the cell, a loose nail in the floorboard, a rusted hinge. She began to work on the wood, her fingers bleeding, her mind focused on one thing: survival. On the beach of the Forgotten Cove, the wreckage of the Tempest's Kiss burned, casting an orange glow against the night sky. Rowan Blackwell spat blood into the sand and pushed himself up. His head swam, and his ribs screamed in protest, but the pain was distant, muted by a rage so cold it burned. "Captain," Finn rasped from nearby. The big Irishman was clutching his shoulder, his face pale. "The ship, she's gone." "The ship is wood and canvas," Rowan growled, staggering to his feet. He looked out at the mouth of the cove, where the Pale Rider was raising its anchor, preparing to leave with the tide. "My life is on that boat." He turned to the survivors, 20 men, battered, bruised, but alive. They looked at him, waiting. "We have the longboats," Rowan said, his voice gaining strength. "The fog is rolling in. Frost thinks we are dead. He thinks he has won." He drew his cutlass, the metal gleaming in the firelight. "We take them in the dark," Rowan commanded. "No quarter, no mercy. We bring them home." A cup lifts their ally. Thick and gray, it blanketed the water, muffling the sound of oars cutting through the surf. Rowan sat in the bow of the lead boat, his eyes fixed on the looming shadow of the Pale Rider. They reached the hull undetected. Grappling hooks, wrapped in cloth, were thrown silently over the rail. Rowan was the first up the rope. He vaulted over the railing, landing softly on the deck. A sentry turned, eyes widening, but Rowan's knife found his throat before a sound could escape. He signaled to his men, "Spread out!" Then a bell rang out. A sharp, frantic alarm. They had been spotted. Now, Rowan roared. The deck erupted into chaos. Rowan's men surged forward like demons rising from the mist. Pistols cracked, swords clashed, and the screams of surprised men filled the air. Rowan cut a path through the melee, a whirlwind of steel and fury. He didn't stop to parry. He attacked with a reckless abandonment. He had one goal. "Frost!" he screamed, his voice tearing through the noise. On the quarterdeck, Simon Frost drew his rapier, looking down with a sneer. "Persistent dog." Rowan charged up the stairs, his cutlass meeting Frost's rapier with a spark-showering crash. "You have lost, Rowan," Frost taunted, dancing back with the grace of a fencer. He lunged, the tip of his blade slicing Rowan's cheek. "You have no ship, you have no future." "I have her," Rowan bellowed. He ignored the cut, stepping inside Frost's guard. He slammed the hilt of his sword into Frost's nose, shattering bone. Frost stumbled back, blood spraying. He lost his composure, slashing wildly. Rowan parried, then drove his shoulder into Frost's chest, sending the man sprawling onto the deck. Rowan stood over him, raising his blade for the killing blow. "Wait!" Frost gasped, reaching into his coat. A gunshot rang out. Rowan didn't fire. He froze, looking down at his chest, expecting to see blood. But he felt nothing. Frost's eyes went wide. He looked down at the red stain blossoming on his own white coat. He slumped back, a look of utter shock on his face. Rowan turned, standing at the door of the captain's cabin, smoke curling from the barrel of a stolen pistol, was Isabel. Her dress was torn, her hair wild, and her eyes were fierce. "I told you," she said, her voice shaking but loud. "He is coming for us." Dash. The battle ended as quickly as it had begun. With their captain dead, Frost's crew surrendered or jumped overboard. Rowan dropped his sword. He stumbled toward Isabel. She dropped the pistol and ran to him. They collided in the middle of the blood-slicked deck, holding on to each other as if they were the only solid things in a dissolving world. "You're alive," Isabel sobbed into his chest. "You came." "I told you," Rowan rasped, burying his face in her neck, breathing in her scent to chase away the smell of death. "I would burn the world down." Jacob ran out from the cabin, colliding with Rowan's legs. Rowan fell to his knees, wrapping his arms around both of them. The three of them huddled together on the deck of the conquered ship. "It's over," Rowan whispered. "It's finally over." Epilogue. 3 months later. The ship was smaller, a sleek schooner painted white, bearing no flag but the colors of the wind. It sailed through the calm waters of the Caribbean, far from the trade routes and the hunting grounds of the Navy. On the deck, a boy sat with a fishing line, laughing as a colorful fish broke the surface. "Pull it in, Jacob, gently," Isabel called out from the helm. She looked healthier, her skin kissed by the sun, her dress simple and light. Rowan stood behind her, his arms wrapped around her waist, his chin resting on her shoulder. The scars on his face had faded to silver lines, and the darkness in his eyes had been replaced by a quiet peace. "He's getting good at that," Rowan murmured. "He has a good teacher," Isabel replied, leaning back into him. Rowan kissed her temple. "Where to, Mrs. Blackwell?" Isabel looked at the horizon, endless and open. There were no more walls, no more cages. Just the sea, the sky, and the man who had given her everything. "Wherever the wind takes us," she said. Rowan smiled, tightening his hold on her. "Then we sail," he said. And they did. Love had found its harbor.